Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clarity 16.4.1 Supportability Training. My name is Dave Sprague. In this section, we will review the new advanced chart types and widget updates that have been included in the reporting workspace. So let's start with what's new. First off, there are several new charts, advanced charts that have been introduced in the name of Bubble, Split Pack Bubble, and the Gantt. So from a bubble chart perspective, obviously there's data visualization, and this goes beyond the scatter plot by replacing individual points with bubbles of varying sizes to represent a third numeric variable in addition to the XY coordinates. The split pack bubble chart organizes bubbles into distinct non-overlapping groups based on a categorical variable, allowing for side-by-side comparisons of data clusters. And the Gantt, I know everyone's familiar with that. It's been included in the reporting workspace, which is that visual project management tool that we all love, using horizontal bars to map out tasks or investments, durations against a timeline to show a project schedule and progress at a glance. Next, we've enabled breakdown dimensions for bar, column, and line visualizations. Breakdown dimensions are now available for these charts when viewing total values rather than a timeline. So you would simply disable periods to use the breakdown dimension. And as a reminder, in 16.4, breakdown dimension was available for line, column, and bar charts, but it was limited to time-based views. Next, we've enabled aggregated totals and negative values in pie and donut visualizations. Specifically, we've got min-max average aggregations have been added to those charts. And then negative value aggregation has also been added to the pie and donut charts. And the last piece we'll cover off on is the ability in a table widget to hide its grouping labels. So you can hide column headers within a table to make the visualization more pertinent to the user's experience. Okay, so let's get on with the demonstration. Come back out to Clarity. We're in our reporting workspace, and I'll start off with our bubble chart. Let me get into edit mode. So what's changed? So with respect to adding these widgets, I'll just show you here. There's the new icons are here to double click or drag and drop into your workspace. You've got Bubble, Split Pack, which we'll cover next, and then we'll cover Alcon Gantt briefly. Right, so if we come back out, here's our Gantt, our bubble chart, which shows on an X and Y dimension. So in this example, we have finish date and we have business alignment score on the Y-axis. The radius or the size of the bubble is determined based on the chosen metric. In this case, it's planned costs. So when you hover over a particular bubble, in this case, an investment instance, you get the name of that instance, you get the value, the planned cost metric value, and the readout for the finish and business alignment. And of course, I've opted to configure the legend in the report. Now this is interactive. You see when I hover, the balance of the bubbles are kind of dimmed, viewed as dim. I can actually select or select an item in the legend, which removes it from the grid. This is helpful in the case if I want to get to, for example, those bubbles that are behind the larger 19 million planned cost new merger project for Falcon. So I simply select that or check the box, check the legend item, and it removes it from the grid or the plot, and it allows me to get to those other bubbles that were hidden. And there's some interaction here to get through any number of legend items. So let's just kind of jump into the setup. Obviously, we've chosen the bubble chart. This is all the different examples. um, got my provider, a title in this case, and the key elements here are the X dimension. I've chosen finish date. And just as a note, each bubble that's represented represents a record based on the selected attribute. For example, when I select an attribute from the project object, um, that then plots each individual project as a bubble. So that's why the legend here kind of further substantiates that info. So I've chosen finish date, and that's going to derive then projects or investments, right? My y-axis is business alignment, and my metric that I've chosen is plan cost. And again, that's going to determine the radius or the size of the bubble. Now, another important thing to note here is the sorting by. So I've chosen to sort by plan cost in a descending manner. So what's going to happen here is the um, the system is going to go from the greatest value to the lowest value until it runs out of bubbles. So we're going to show, in this case, the first 100 bubbles. Their default is 100, and the maximum is 500. And of course, there's the legend to display. So when I choose my plan cost ascending, it's going to start with the greatest value and run to the smallest value. So that's why we have here at the top, we've got this new merger Falcon is at 19 million. Then it's going to go from there and go through all the different plan cost values and present the first 100 values. Okay, so that's the benefit of the max bubbles. And then of course the legend, you want to show it or not. In this case, I'll say none, and it cleans it up, adds a little more space for you. But I'm going to bring it back in because we're going to use the legend in a second here. The other thing, in addition to configuring the titles for your X, Y axis and Y axis and showing the grid lines, etc., there's another entry here to show a background color, and this is particular to the Y axis. So if I go ahead and select that, that's going to overlay the business alignment, what do you call it, display mapping colors. Apologies there. Now notice that in this release, the background color, there's a little bit, it takes over the grid. Its opacity is 1 point, it's called opacity. It's 1.0. We're going to actually drop that down to 0.4 to lighten that up. So this background color provides an additional layer of perspective, so you understand where that's coming from. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about here is on the styling, in particular the color coding. So I've selected an example here. It's just going to use the auto coloring. You can control the color in a single setting, and automatic is just going to go off into the system and choose its own scheme. When I select display mapping, it unlocks an additional menu for choosing attributes that have a configured attribute. So I've chosen work status. I can see the legend here in this release, and then the colors of the bubbles then reflect those individual work statuses. I do want to point out that in the next release, we're going to change the behavior of this such that I can still pick work status. The bubbles themselves will change to be those colors based on display mapping, configured display mapping. But if you want to use a legend, you'll maintain all of the instances like we have here. However, the color associated with the instances would match the display mapping. So imagine, if you will, a complete listing again of all the investments or instances that are represented here using the 3 color codes across the number of instances. So that's why I'm switching back and forth just to give you an idea of what's coming in the subsequent release. Okay, let's move on to the split packed bubble. So this is, as I mentioned, this is a view. I think I'm in mode. Yep. This is a view of a larger bubble, which is really the dimension, and the inner bubble is what we refer to as the breakdown dimension. And you can see the legend on the right is using work status in this example. And all of the inner bubbles are investments that are associated with this work status. And the size of the bubble, the internal bubble, is based on the planned cost score, right? So here we have the new merger Falcon project in 19.5, and it's in the on hold bucket. Let's see, I can hover on the exterior and I get the on hold bucket. A couple of other examples here are basically the two different charts here. We've got work status as the dimension, the outer bubble, and the manager is on the inner bubble. And again, planned cost is determining the size of the inner bubble. The outer bubble itself will just auto size based on the content that's there. This one is an example on the right. It's the department is the color, the outer bubble, and the inner bubble is the goal associated with that business, with that department. And again, planned cost is driving the size of the internal bubble. So if I come over to this guy, we'll go into edit mode. And the key things here are the dimension, right? That's the outer bubble. I've chosen work status and name. And I've chosen, which is from the investment object. So that then each individual bubble represents the investment name or an individual investment. And again, the metric, the sorting, again, is similar behavior. It doesn't determine where the sort order is used to filter the top results. It has no effect on where an instance is positioned within the dimension, but the sort order does control which bubbles are included. So here the system receives instances with the highest planned cost first, filling the breakdown until the maximum bubble count is reached. And that's determined over here on the Format tab, where you've got the maximum bubbles. So in this case, we've chosen 10, but in reality, our clarity, we're using work status, so there's only 5, bubbles that would show up, unless there's some other types you have. But that's controlling the number of breakdown dimension bubbles. I'm sorry, the maximum dimension bubbles. And then there's the concept of breakdown. So how many inner bubbles do I want to control and view? So the in terms of the maximum bubbles, 10 is a default and 100 is the max. For the breakdown, same, default is 10 and the maximum is 100. And of course, I can show my legend or not, right? Another thing that's cool to check out is kind of the coloring that's associated with that. I have it currently set up for display mapping, and it's using the work status display mapping colorization to determine the exterior and interior bubble color. So they have the same color, both exterior and interior bubbles have the same coloring, but I'm using the display mapping. If I switch to auto, it's going to regenerate it again, and it's just going to use the system, automatic color coding. But again, it's using the same color, so you have a consistent color from bubble to bubble. But it just depends on if you want to use display mapping or not. Okay. So the next topic that we want to cover off on is our Gantt. So let's come back out to the report designer and I'll look at the Gantt chart here. And my second, I go into edit mode. My second tab has got an example of a Gantt. Again, this is the Gantt chart icon right there to bring it in. And when you do a mouse over, you get the bar start and finish dates for the investment. So fairly straightforward. I've chosen, if I go into my configuration here, I choose my columns, with a standard picker. from each object, but it shows those that are included, and you can see them. The order in which they were selected is the order in which they're presented in the table to the left. And I've chosen, in terms of my periods that I've got, I do that selection here. Up in the period area, I do my 12 periods, starting with the current period, and and I'm doing the offset. So I just start my start period and I choose 12. So if I get rid of the thing, you can see I've got my 12 periods that are coming into view here. So very cool. And I've got my standard, configure, copy, and delete functions, just like we have on all the other charts as well. So if I come back into the configure mode, as I mentioned, we've got our columns that we're selecting. Of course, there's a name, the data provider, and a title. You can see those are standard things that all of our widgets and our chart types have. I've got my sort by and ascending, which is going to drive the behavior of the investment. In this case, the name of the investment that's presented on the left there. Another thing I want to point out is, in the interest of preserving white space, and depending on the complexity of your project and your audience, the right view can be the difference between a clear roadmap and a confusing mess of bars. So we've got this row height set up here. It's uncomfortable right now. You can see the white space dedicated to each row. If I go to compact, it does tighten up, puts more information in the table itself or in the chart itself. And then roomy is kind of the opposite. It gives you a little more space. So depending on your content and your audience, you can change that as well. Last piece, similar concept, is around the Gantt colors. I've got it right now set to display mapping. And I'm choosing, it allows me to choose attributes that have a set display mapping. If I come and go auto, it's going to change it and just use the system's own mechanism to come up with the color coding of the Gantt bars. I'll come back and I'll pick my project type, and it updates it and gives me back my colors. So that's good to be aware of there. The next thing I want to talk about is breakdown. So let's shift gears away from those three charts. We looked at bubble, split pack bubble, and Gantt. And now we're going to take a look at the extension of what we've done for breakdown dimension. So going to edit mode here. So in the previous release, breakdown dimension was available. But it required you to, if I just go into setup here, you had to use periods. So everything was based on a timeline. So we've extended this capability, breakdown dimension, for bar, column, and line to just basically use data instead of a timeline, but you're adding a third layer of data to what are typically 2D visualization. So in the next three examples, I'm using dimension department, and goal is the breakdown dimension, and then the metric is plan cost. So that's deriving the height of the bars, etc. So what I mean by the third layer of data here, in terms of, like, this is plan costs along the bottom and department on the right, and my the legend is goal. So you can see the slices that are here inside each of these bars, in this case, the department. So it allows me to see the different layers of information. So if I go into the edit mode, there's a concept of how many, we call it a breakdown series. So how many do you want to show? So in terms of goal, how many series do you want to show in a given bar? So I've said show 5 and group all the others. So that's what the gray represents here. So that's an example of the bar chart. If I go, I'll close this out and just go to column. Same concept, department and plan cost and goal. So I have some visualization here. I can see the different slices or the series that is here. Maximum breakdown series is set up here. And from a line perspective, same concept. but we refer to these breakdown as maximum breakdown lines, right? And points. So here we have the goal of, well, do grow the business. We've got the planned cost for department, and I can see in each of these departments, I can see uh, the planned costs associated with each department across the different goals structure. So that's the value of extending breakdown dimension to non-period based or non-timeline based charting. Okay, the next thing I want to show is related to aggregated information. So let's go back here. We'll go into our fourth chart. And I want to talk about the negative values that have been shown. I'll just go into edit mode here. So pie and donut charts now have negative values by calculating the slice size based on an absolute metric. So it's going to get to 100% in terms of a count, but it will now properly show the resulting negative value that's associated with the particular, in this case, work status. The compliance score just happens to be a custom attribute that we've created in this data set, and it's then using an absolute value to give you the proper representation of the donut portion or the pie chart portion with the actual negative value. Okay, so that's ready for to see. The next thing I want to talk about is the min, max, and average that's associated with pie charts and donut charts. So here's KPIs by project type as an example report. I'll go into my planned cost widget here that's a pie chart. And the key thing here is that we've included now, it wasn't here before, the ability to use max, min, and average for a given attribute. And the same thing goes for the donut chart, bringing in average, max, and min if you wish to use that. So those are included there now, which is really cool. Okay, the last piece that we want to touch on is the ability to hide these headers or these column headers or the grouping labels that are in table widgets, both in the report perspective from the viewer and the exported PowerPoint or PDF documents. So I've got an example here. If you go into preview, you'll see that these continue to show. And I've got an example here in a PDF output where they're also included, right? This is the current behavior, the behavior as of 16.4.0. So what I want to show is there's a new toggle that's been introduced that allows you to say, hey, you know what? I don't need those because I've got the ability to rename columns and whatnot, and I don't need these additional bits of information in the report. So what I'm going to do is go into feature toggles. There's a new toggle here called hide object grouping labels and header of reporting table widgets. Just as an aside, it is enabled by default. I just turned it off for purposes of the demo today. And we'll go back into the reporting workspace, back to our report. And I'll click in here. And you can see we're in kind of, since we're not in edit mode yet, you can see the behavior preview. It's actually removed those headers. If I come back into edit mode, it just shows the grouping attribute that I've used. If I go back into preview mode, it definitely cleans up this table. And as I go from next to next to next, the same layout is in place. If I open up the PowerPoint that has been saved, you can see the behavior is also honored in the export. So it's a change both to the user interface as well as the export capabilities to now honor that toggle. Okay. All right, so that concludes the demonstration. Just want to thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, you know where to find the product management team. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.